My name is unimportant. But what I do is, I'm a member of an elite unit you'll never hear of. We contain incidences of all kinds. Not only do we deal with physical issues, but we also keep the information from the public. It's better that way. It keeps people from panicking and helps maintain order. I found a notebook on my last mission. Even though it violates the rules, I owe it to the author to tell his story. I know it'll be written off as a conspiracy theory or some crackpot Reddit post, so there's no real danger. At least, I don't think there is. It reads as follows. Here I sit in this moldy, godforsaken cell, awaiting my unfair death sentence to be carried out. I can't stand my neighbors. They're noisy and they stink. It's my own fault, though. If I hadn't been responsible and tried to help, I wouldn't be here right now. Ironically, doing the right thing has doomed me. It all started a long time ago, in a golden age that I like to call last week. Good morning, Miss Watner. You're looking as lovely as ever. For someone who looks so old that even a mummy would turn tail and run. Why, Jonathan, aren't you sweet? Thank you, ma'am. Will that be paper or plastic? Paper, of course. We can always grow more trees, can't we? Yes, ma'am. Maybe one day soon we'll use one to make you a nice coffin. The old crone drifted away, flashing her huge diamond ring and mink coat. I never understood why she bothered to come to the grocery store, when she could always have her servants do it for her. Then it hit me. This was her way of staying in touch with the commoners, of proving to herself that she was still human. I can't blame her too much, I guess. If I was obscenely rich, I'd want to flaunt it too. Uh-oh, looks like Mr. Burgess is heading towards Jane's register. I'd better go help. Jane, you have an urgent phone call in the office. I'll cover for you. A wave of relief washes over her, as panic had started to flood her face. Thank you, she whispered, touching my shoulder and sending warmth through me. Humph, Mr. Burgess mumbled, leering at her as she went. Take away the only good part of my day. Good morning, Mr. Burgess. Are you having a party? I asked, as a dozen cans of Sterno rolled down the belt, followed by 10 boxes of matches and 5 cases of bottled water. Never mind what I'm doing, he growled. Oof, I struggled to stay upright from the stench of alcohol that wafted from his mouth. Yes, sir. That'll be $157.32, please. He grumbled something that I couldn't make out as his gnarled fingers reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 brand new $100 bills. I handed him back his change. You have a nice day now. He shot me a look of scorn mixed with pity, a look I would have expected to see a hunter give to wounded prey. Humph, was all he said as he scuttled out through the door. As I watched him go with the same look of scorn and pity, a man stumbled in. He wasn't remarkable in any way, but something told me to keep an eye on him. He was of average height and size, but he shuffled instead of walked. The look in his eyes was vacant, as if the lights were on, but no one was home. He shuffled past me just as Jane returned to her register. She shot me a look of gratitude with just a hint of affection, but I was too focused to acknowledge it. As if mesmerized, I drifted behind him, trying to remain inconspicuous as he slowly made his way to the pharmacy section. I turned the corner and there he stood, swaying back and forth as though driven by a non-existent breeze. I approached him. Can I help you, sir? As he turned towards me, I could see scratches on his neck and a hint of dried blood under his jacket. He stared at me with those empty eyes. Instinctually, my hand slipped behind my back and grasped the handle of my knife, something I carried for just such an occasion. I set my feet and prepared for him to lunge at me. This is it, I thought. 12 years of working at this menial job have finally paid off. I'm in the right place at the right time to stop the outbreak. I just need to be sure, or I'll spend the next 20 somewhere much worse. I pulled the knife out just an inch when he cleared his throat. Sorry, it's my wife. She isn't feeling well. I slid the knife back into my sheath and said, I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can help you find? His vacant eyes drifted back to the shelf. He picked up a bottle of Midol and a pack of tampons. These should do it. He tried to force a smile and shuffled past me towards the checkout. Something was still nagging at me about him. I went back to my register and bagged groceries while he waited in line. When he shuffled towards the front door, I mumbled something about needing carts and followed him outside. He had parked his car at the edge of the lot, but even partway there, I could see the car he was heading for was rocking back and forth and sounded like someone was pounding from inside. As I approached, I saw blood smeared all over the window and the face of a large woman pressed against the glass. I was 30 feet away when he reached the car and unlocked the door. "Don't!" I screamed, reaching for the knife, but he'd already pulled the door handle. She exploded out of the car and launched herself at him. He fell backwards and she began devouring him like a starving lion on its prey. She clawed at him and ripped out his throat with her teeth, making a geyser of blood. He tried to cry out, but all that came out was a bloody gurgle. I shook off the shock of the pure, stark reality of the situation and took advantage of my opening. I held my knife over my head, closed my eyes, and swung as hard as I could. I missed the first try and only managed to slice off her ear. Needless to say, that got her attention. She ceased gouging at him and turned towards me. Crap! I tried to ready myself in a defensive stance, but she lunged at me, growling. I held the knife in front of me and she impaled herself on it. Unfortunately, it sunk into her neck. The force of her impact knocked me onto my back. I nearly lost consciousness when my head bounced off the pavement. My vision swam as she snapped her bloody teeth at me. I held her at bay with the knife that was still lodged in her throat, the same knife I would need to kill her. After a quick moment's thought and a frantic plan, I shoved my forearm into her chest and yanked the knife free. I lost ground in the process and felt her teeth scrape my nose as I swung the knife around and buried it in her ear. It looked like a movie in pause. She stopped with her mouth frozen open, then slowly rolled off of me. I sat up as best I could, stared down at her, pulling my knife out, and then I shoved it in his ear, just to be sure. "Freeze!" came a loud voice from behind me. I turned to see 3 police cars with their lights flashing. 6 officers, all pointing their guns at me. "Drop the knife, get on your knees, lace your fingers behind your head," the officer said. "Are you kidding me? I just saved everyone," I said incredulously. "Do it now or we will shoot you." The knife clattered to the ground as I did as I was told. In a heartbeat, I was cuffed and stuffed, riding towards the station in the back of the police car. "Third-degree murder? Are you nuts?" I yelled at the attorney seated across the table from me. "That's the best I can do. You brutally murdered 2 people in broad daylight in front of a dozen witnesses." "They weren't people anymore." "Let me guess, you thought they were?" "Yes, I did, and they were." He threw his papers into his briefcase and started towards the door. "I'll register an insanity plea if you want me to." "I'm not insane. You have to listen to me. We can stop it. Find out who those people were and where they were coming from. The police in that town need to be alerted." He rolled his eyes. "I already know who they were and where they were from. Michael and Sarah Weston. They lived right here in Frost Creek. They both worked at the hospital. She was a nurse and he worked in maintenance." I slumped in my chair. It's over. There's no way I can stop it if it started in town. The guards took me back to my cell, where I sat in quiet desperation, trying to decide what to do next. I took the tablet and the pencil I'd been given when I was booked and started writing this as a bit of a history. Right now, it's just so I can keep the events straight in my own head. I'm calling it Dear John, a letter to the undead. By the time I'm done writing this, there won't be anyone left alive to read it. It only started yesterday, back when my life was uncomplicated and boring. When I was done writing, my wrist hurt. Logging down the demise of humanity will do that. I tried to warn the officers when they would pass my cell at mealtime. It became a litany. Is there anything strange going on in town? Do you have enough food, water, and ammo at home? Is your family someplace where you can protect them? My concern was met with scorn and even alarm. I guess they felt threatened by my questions. I don't know why. After a while, the officers came through less and less. That was when it happened. My cell window looked out towards a truck stop. I was lying on my bunk when I felt as much as heard the explosion. I jumped up and stared in shock as the tanker truck was up in flames, sending black smoke pouring into the air. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and still no fire trucks had arrived. With little wind, the smoke had settled at street level, making visibility near zero. An hour later, the wind picked up and blew away the haze just enough to see the sun riding low on the horizon. That's when I saw them. They were shambling through the haze, unfocused with no direction. They just came. I watched with a helpless detachment, knowing that there was nothing I could do about it. I heard the first gunshot a few minutes later. They shambled into the cell block, 2 and 3 at a time. It didn't take long for the smell of rotting flesh to surround my cell, reaching through the bars like groupies at a rock concert. Thank God there was a wall behind me. I watched in hopeless fascination as the inmates in the cell next to me got too close to the bars and were torn apart. So here I sit, the putrid scent of death and decay overwhelming me, but no more than the knowledge that I could have stopped this, or at least warned people if I hadn't been arrested. The least I can do is write this letter to whoever might be left alive to read it. So maybe they know how this whole thing began, and it might help them in some small way. Day 2. I can honestly say that this is the first time I've ever entertained the thought of drinking out of the toilet. Thirst is driving me mad, though, and the sink is unfortunately located next to the bars. My guests have not gotten bored and moved on like I thought they would. If anything, they seem to have doubled in numbers. On the plus side, all the growling and jostling kept me awake so that I wouldn't have to worry about being grabbed in my sleep. No, I can be sure I'll be awake and alert so that I feel every set of teeth as I'm slowly devoured. It's always good to think positively. One of the deputies has made his way to the front of the cell. The keys to the cell dangle tantalizingly from his belt. I'm hypnotized by them. I could go insane just thinking about the possibilities. But the fact of the matter is, I know I'd be dead before I shoved the key in the lock. It does make me smile, though, knowing that the Walking Dead are too brainless to realize that they literally hold the keys to my demise. Day 3. I did it. I'm not proud of it, but the overwhelming thirst drove me to it. Unfortunately, there's not much left in the bowl. I flushed to see if the water level would rise again, but it didn't. I've kept the bowl clear of contamination, though. I have taken some small measure of revenge against my future killers by relieving myself in their open mouths. I've become a fairly accurate shot, too. I stand just out of reach and then fire away. They do draw back from it, but I don't really know why. I'm sure it doesn't even register in their dead brains. It's still strange, though. The ones that I hit don't return. Day 4. I can't stand the relentless, overwhelming, crushing thought that I'm powerless, that at some point I'll succumb. I'm gonna try to grab the keys. I don't know what I'll do from there, but it's clear that help isn't coming. If I want to survive, I'll have to do it on my own. Day 5. This will be my last entry. I can't believe what a fool I was. Even though I was able to grab the keys, I paid for it dearly. 2 of them got a hold of my arm and bit right through it. I wrenched away with all my strength, screaming in sheer agony as my injured arm ripped away from my body, leaving them with a snack and me with a bloody stump. I'm bleeding as I write this. I haven't even tried to stop it. I'd rather die this way than be ripped to pieces by those creatures. At least it's on my terms, not theirs. If someone finds this, I hope that something in these pages will be of some help. I only wish it could be more. Maybe by keeping these creatures distracted here, someone else is having a fighting chance to escape. I hope so. Goodbye. I destroyed the notebook. Standard procedure. Contain the threat, contain the information. That's what we do. It was a big deal locally, but we were able to keep it out of the national news. We told the public there was a toxic gas leak that made people sick, but that it was being contained. The explosion at the gas station was covered as a random accident. It did help us with cleanup, though. Nothing like a giant fire to throw all the undead bodies on. I salute the unfortunate soul for his brave sacrifice. I just wish we'd been called in sooner. We might have been able to save him. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. This was written by a very talented Reddit writer named HorrorWriter1717. I've linked his profile below, so if you'd like to look at his other stuff, I highly recommend it. He has some very nice pieces of horror that I'll definitely be reading later on the channel. So, before we sign off, let's go ahead and thank our sponsors. Thanks to Leslie Lou Riddle and Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributors. Thanks to Xaronana for being our Ghost Rider tier contributor. And thanks to Glen Jenkins for being our Ghost Rider tier contributor. Thanks, guys. We just couldn't do it without you. If you too would like to support the show, come on down to Patreon. For just $5 a month, you too can be part of our spooky skeleton tier army and have your name read out at the end of every TikTok and every YouTube video that I do. You also get your spooky a day early on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So, what are you waiting for? Come on down. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.